So give it a second, it'll start there. Quite an interesting crowd. Coach is already here. Lopez and Caro already know the story. So there's TL and Magic Man.
All right. Two is better. Two is a crowd.
Yeah. Okay, people on YouTube, you could join the Telegram group. Join the IMC Telegram group. Okay, and that's where you should go. And now I'll click record. Okay, what's up? So this could really evolve into anything we want it to be. Damien, anything we want it to be. I was promoted because none of the officers hit me up that they wanted to speak tonight. So I always want to go. I mean, I could keep going and going, but duty calls most of the time. You know, I can't be streaming all day, and so here we are. I'm doing open gathering, and earlier I was talking with Dr. Adam McSood. He's been living here at Base 1 for 7 days, going on 14 days for his Guardian training. And, you know, him and I have some similarities that are more similarities than I have with other guys in IMC. That's just so much formal education or whatever that means. And we were talking earlier, and it was connecting a lot of dots for both of us. So I was like, well, maybe you could ask me that on open gathering tonight. It'd be a good story for everybody. And so here he is, Dr. Adam.
Yeah.
You know him. I know him. So, and you said you had, I mean, basically the gist of the conversation, I don't even know how it started.
I should be asking you the questions. I'm interviewing you here.
Well, how does it, whatever's useful for you, you said you had some more things.
Yeah.
It was a good story. I don't know how it started.
Yeah. So I was asking Chris, because we both have a high level degrees. He's a PhD. I'm an MD. So I don't know how it got brought up. It just got brought up, but it's good we recap. So
you was just talking about yoga.
Yeah.
Somehow that went into my yoga business.
Yeah. So you started in college, you were an engineering degree, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you went to your master's program.
I went to college to wrestle. Like that was my whole focus, was wrestling. But I was still misguided thinking that like I need college education, or I wasn't well thought out. Like if I had realized how much I was going to and wanted to focus on wrestling to be a national champion, a world champion, I would have picked an easier degree. And I may have, even if I had really realized, like if I had really had some good guidance from like a male in terms of like business and life success. I mean, my dad was a great dad in like 1,000 ways that other dads aren't even great dads. But as far as, I mean, he was very conventional in terms of like the job. So, you know, somebody like me guiding somebody like I would have gone straight to the Olympic Training Center and just trained for the Olympics, which is a different style of wrestling than college. And I would have just gotten a job, just had some job to pay for myself and train Olympics for like 5 years before, and then go for it.
So you were really a wrestler.
I was a wrestler that went to school, and I had an aptitude for math and stuff. But you know, no social skills, and just totally focused on, I mean, I started cutting weight on like the second week of college, just because I was like ready to get to it. And it was funny because my roommate was a heavyweight, so that was a really contrast. He didn't have to cut any weight, so whatever.
Yeah. So okay, so you were good at math, so then that's why you went to engineering. You said, I like this.
I started with physics, and then I moved on to aerospace engineering, and then I went to industrial engineering for like what do you call it? Eligibility reasons. I needed a certain amount of my hours to count towards my major by my third year of college to stay eligible to compete my third year of college. Mm-hmm. So I had to choose a related field it had to be related enough that all my physics and aerospace engineering credits would count towards the degree.
Mhm.
So I couldn't really go, by my third year, I couldn't go outside of engineering. So I just chose industrial engineering as the easiest engineering that was offered there and had the most women. That was really the selling point. It had the most women of all the engineering disciplines.
So industrial engineering.
So I went industrial engineering for a bachelor's, and then, I finished that. I stopped wrestling with a year left. So I was really getting into, using substances and things my 5th year of university, just kind of coping with the big open space in my heart and body for, not wrestling anymore, just stopping cold turkey. And, selling weed and paying all my bills and everything with that. And then, and I finished the degree and I felt very unprepared for anything. And I just thought, well, I'll just go for a master's. It just seemed like I didn't know anything but school. I mean, I was, up through high school and then college, and I was lost. I had a bad ending with wrestling. We got into a big thing with my coach, and I was writing letters to the athletic director and had all these meetings and got thrown out of the banquet and all that shit. So
yeah. So
yeah. So then I returned for a master's in industrial engineering, just looking for direction.
Yeah, just to fill the time. It sounded productive. It sounded like you weren't really that passionate about it, though.
I didn't know what I was going to do with life. I mean, now I didn't have the prospects in life that I do now.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking. I didn't really have any. I didn't feel like I had any help with the decision making process of what to do with my life. Just so going for an engineering job seemed like the thing to do. It was either that I did a summer internship with an insurance company, and I did I had coached camps for wrestling, and I had considered, well, just become a high school teacher and coach wrestling, or looking into some junior college or whatever. I wouldn't have gotten a job at a Division I university. It would have had to been really not a good Division I wrestling program, because I didn't end as a stellar, it was a bad falling out. But I could have coached and then worked my way up. If I proved to be a good junior college coach, I would have gotten an NCAA fucking job. I mean, you don't have to be the greatest wrestler to be the greatest coach. And vice versa. Some of the greatest wrestlers make terrible coaches. They suck.
But I imagine your family was saying, "Oh, good job. You're in the master's program." I'm sure your parents they were happy, or they wanted you to do that, I imagine.
Well, I definitely went through a phase of not talking with my parents, especially when I got into drugs.
They knew about it, and
they definitely, even to this day, don't know the extent. It's not like I had a intervention or anything.
How did they know? Did you tell them, or they?
No, I think my second or third summer, they found one of my pipes, and then I did fail a drug test for the NCAA at some point, or for the university or something. I don't know if I ever told them that. Maybe.
Interesting. So
and I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's an important part of your story. I can tell. So then you did the master's. Now, what made you go for the PhD? Because you can get jobs with master's degrees.
Yeah, it was I was still spaced out on psychedelics and things, and it's amazing, really, that. I mean, really,
you're a functioning addict. You went through the master's,
bro, it's insane. I mean, how I did my industrial engineering was just so high. How I finished all of those exams, and I cheated so much, but I didn't really have friends. I don't know how I did it, and it wasn't like I don't know how I cheated. I say that, and it's I don't even know how I cheated. I crammed, and I could remember things, and I just used logic. And somehow I passed all these things.
Yeah.
And then I went for a master's, which was higher level stuff. And that was really fucking with me. And I got a girlfriend. That was the first time I told anybody I love you, was that girl, and ruined my life. It was terrible. Moved in with her. Terrible.
Same old story.
Real bad. Yeah, it was really bad, man. Quite an adventure.
Yeah.
And so then we broke up.
Where is she to this day? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, she's still in Oklahoma, has some kids.
Okay.
I don't know. Last time I saw.
Yeah. So, okay. So you go to the PhD. Why did you
Well-
do master's to PhD?
Well, because I was still continuing like the same thing as the undergrad, where I was like, I don't know what I want to be.
Oh, okay.
I don't
You
know
were
what-
kicking
so
the can down the road.
I was doing that well, and then but finishing a master's and kind of switching subjects somewhere. The master's degree was 4 semesters with some summer class, so 2 years, and kind of halfway through that, I came across environmental engineering sciences, and that I really liked it. I really liked what I was reading.
Okay.
So my industrial engineering master's was kind of shifting towards that, and so the people at Florida was the highest like living lineage of what I was reading, what I was studying with environmental sciences. So I went there for a visit because it was just a continuation, like ongoing. Basically, when at the time, my passion was really playing my guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
After I'd used that as a coping during wrestling because of cutting weight, and that was something that I used to entertain myself a lot while cutting weight. And then when I was getting into weed and stuff, because I got into like really good weed from the onset, and it's quite a thing. It's quite a thing being as athletic as I was, as fit as I was, clean as I was, as fit and strong as I was, to get super high, because I became like a superhero. And I was also a very, very intelligent person, kind of stuck into the word is a ruffian. I was like a ruffian. I was somebody that just like brawled and liked to bang heads and inflict pain and that kind of stuff. Not necessarily, or I was a grappler. So I was kind of a very smart man trapped inside a knucklehead that was real fit and strong, and was around my other real fit, strong wrestling buddies. And so I'd get high and then I'd play guitar, and I would tap into like real high levels of aesthetic because I was catching people's attention just with like improvisation things and whatever. I was like tapping into that ability, especially, and then with mushrooms and things that just further pushed it and all that stuff. So when I was finishing my master's, so that was something I did very kind of almost diligently. Like I was playing a lot of guitar up until I got that girlfriend, and then I stopped for a year. And then when I broke up with her, then I went way heavy into LSD and the opiates and the guitar playing while I was finishing my master's.
Wow.
And so when the master's was done, then I really went after it for 3 months that summer. And that's when I got into yoga.
So you finished your master's, and how many did you take a year off between your master's and your PhD?
Kind of a semester, but halfway through the semester I started. So somewhere over that summer or early the next fall or something, I drove to Florida from Oklahoma, and I did the interview with the guy that was the main professor there. And so I got accepted to that and started getting paid to do research in like October of that year. So kind of like halfway into the semester, or less than halfway into the semester, I moved from Oklahoma to Florida and just got a house and started that. So and that's what helped clean me up. So I was 5 months, I practiced on and off a little yoga.
Detox.
And then, I just took a big bag of my weed with me. I didn't have any connections in Florida. I was a very antisocial person. All the connections I'd made, some really, really good connections, the best weed in Oklahoma. People would drive from real far. I sold to a lot of the football players and basketball players on the OU team. And I didn't have good social skills. I was just an ethical businessman because of my dad. And, I made a lot. I sold over $1 million of weed.
Whoa.
And then I moved to Florida with a big bag of like my best weed, the remainder of my drugs, and just kind of practiced yoga, went to the university, did my research, and just used up all my drug stash and my weed. At some point, and I was still very, very passionate about music. I was really exploring innovative ways to pluck the guitar and different harmonics and things that you can hit, bell sounds and things you can hit on the strings. I had 11 guitars, a big half stack amplifier, and which is like, you play a concert with that, and so on.
Wow.
So like that was my passion, but then I didn't have any weed connects, and I was very antisocial. I had a big, long beard and unibrow and not groomed at all. But real fit because I was.
And you're really smart. I mean, you're doing all of this.
Yeah, but I was twisted up. I was spun out on LSD and stuff.
But you were still passing your classes. Were you passing or were you like doing well? Like what was your
I wasn't
grades?
like a top student. I've never been a top student. I actually wasn't recommended for advanced math in like 7th grade or 8th grade or something. Like my dad had to write a letter. Turns out like, I made $1.5 million, and it's something no one else has done.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. You're very, I guess in this, you're very intelligent from my perception. You're very intelligent, but you didn't really want engineering. You liked the guitar, you liked wrestling, but because you happened to be very smart, you made it through.
I was doing what I had an aptitude for. I didn't know any other way. I was just doing school and I was applying my math and my intelligence to the music. I probably had applied my intelligence to the wrestling. I was very methodical with weight cutting and calorie counting and
almost like neurotic, it sounds like.
I'd seen many more neurotic people. There were definitely some people that were more neurotic about it. Later on in the career, I became more about cutting weight than about competing. I was misguided in ways. But I'm sure, yeah. So intelligent and
so
yeah.
You basically, you got the PhD, you went for the PhD.
I was always very compelling when I would speak about things that I felt certain about. So when it came to academia, I had a certain ambition, a certain vindication about what I was researching about nature and what I could do with I briefly said it once about the thermodynamics of nature, and that's what the PhD was about, measuring that stuff. So I had like all these great ideas. And so when I moved to Florida, like I used up my drug stash and I started growing weed because I didn't have any connections with people. I had no social skills. I didn't know where to get weed. I had been brought into weed in Oklahoma because my wrestling buddies that were also dropping out of wrestling got into weed, and they had a really good connection because one of the guys was local, and it was just like really good. I ended up becoming really good friends with that guy. That's where I got all my weed from for like the next 7 years or something in Oklahoma. So
real quick, why did you drop out of wrestling? Were you just over it? Like you already,
I felt very,
you had a conflict with the coach, right?
Yeah, I felt very,
there was like some interpersonal stuff.
I felt a lot of things. There was a lot of miscommunication. I had a lot of withholds about my drug use or whatever outside. It wasn't much. While I was still wrestling, I dabbled in things other than weed. Mushrooms isn't that bad. LSD is much worse. And mushrooms can be taken more. And weed, especially, you can become a pothead. I'd say weed is worse than mushrooms.
Wow.
As far as, because you can't really.
Addictive potential.
Yeah.
I agree. Weed is very.
What that does with your cardio, especially as a top athlete, cutting weight. And
I mean, people like go psychotic from weed. From really powerful weed, you can like lose your mind, right?
Yeah, the same with mushrooms. That person would still be at risk with mushrooms too.
Yeah.
And any psychedelic.
Yeah.
So
weeds, it can be addictive.
Yeah, and I mean those feelings. But anyway, getting back to the point, what you were saying.
Yeah, you quit the wrestling because there was
problems. There was a lot of communication
Yeah.
problems, and I was very unsatisfied with women.
I see.
Very unsatisfied with women, and I did my social experience.
That's
I
where
was
the
lonely.
weed helped you.
The weed.
It gave you social because you were selling it, so you got to meet a lot of
That's
different
true.
people.
That's true. And on both levels, even just consuming it with my buddies, like we became. Like we were all exploring that psychedelic weed experience. And so we had some profound moments. We explored some mushrooms and, some profound moments with movies and music and things. So I was sharing those experiences and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. Bonding and everything.
Yeah.
And
you felt connection.
Right. And then with the selling and the dealing of weed, there was a lot of that was keeping me busy on the phone. So many messages.
Were you ever worried about getting caught?
And it's so interesting because I was always in a felony range of a school or university. In Oklahoma, I was always living within. I mean, literally, I was selling a lot, many thousands per week, living right across the street from my office. like there's a road and then there's this, I don't know if I'd call it a skyscraper, but it's probably 20 stories tall, the main engineering building.
Yeah.
And it was 100 yards into the building from my house.
Wow.
And, people just coming by anyway.
You were living this kind of like a double life. It's sort of cool. You were like a
100%.
student, and then on the other hand, you were like a boss. You were a boss.
I was a hustler, and I don't know that I was a boss. Because
I mean, the weed boss.
I was a connect. I was a really good connect.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have boss vibes. It was very, I don't know what I was like. It would be interesting to go back in a time machine.
Yeah.
But, I was taken advantage of in a lot of ways. And
Mm.
with the weed, a lot of guys didn't take advantage. I did get jumped once by some football players. And, so I was being too loose with, carefree with my stuff.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's continue. That's an interesting story. I didn't
Right.
know that.
Well, so I transited the drug usage. I really used to amplify my appreciation of my own guitar playing and what have you.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to Florida and I was weaning myself off of drugs by getting addicted to the sensations of yoga and really addicted to the mental experience of my PhD and just diving into the theory and the reading and the writing,
Yeah.
a lot of free writing, wrote a lot of articles, and especially those first few months.
So you liked it. You liked the PhD in the beginning.
All of it was chasing what I now experience as the gratification of the social experience, of the tribe, of the connection. We have a philosophical connection. Even with the women that come by, they might not say it like this, but there's a philosophical connection. Why I say that is because they share certain values, because I'm very expressive about my values, like what I think about feminism and what I think about men and women in the male-female dynamic. It's kind of what's filled my conversation in the same way that like the environmental science filled my PhD, filled my conversation then. I mean, I talked about it with mom and dad. I talked about it with whoever, like that was what my conversations was filled about, and man, was I reclusive. I was hermit. I went from here to the office and back. I practiced. I was a beast. I mean, I would practice yoga outside at 4 a.m. every day. And because I was not well mentally, I couldn't sleep. And, I gained a lot of self-awareness through that physical self-awareness, not mental self-awareness. It came in a stride at like 27 or so. So I moved to Florida around 25, started the PhD, and I was, around 27, I go to Italy for some exchange program. And so I really cleaned up off weed when I did that. I had been smoking weed up until then, but basically what happened is I moved to Florida, and a few months later I was connecting an old wrestling camp buddy who was in Northern California with my old drug dealer, who was the guy I had gotten so much great weed from. And he was taking him like 10 pounds of weed. It was going to be like $40,000 of weed or something. And he got busted on the way and then turned on my friend and brought the cops to him. And so my friend lost his ability to practice architecture, and he also had a bunch of guns and stuff so he got in trouble when they raided him. And I felt real bad about it because I connected him and was pushing him to do it because I was going to make some money off the deal. And so then I didn't want to, I turned vegan right around that time. And so I reasoned I didn't want to buy weed either from people because they were taking the risk for me. I wanted to grow it myself. That was the only ethical thing I could think, kind of like I didn't want to consume cow's milk. And so there was an old man down the street that I saw him playing a guitar one day. I made friends with him. He's this old retired biker gang war veteran guy, real fucked up dude. And ended up being a big thing later when I was getting to pickup, because I fucked probably 14 or so girls in my last year in Gainesville before I hit the road and so I would pride myself on bringing these girls over to Bud's house. Bud was his name, and he's still alive. We're still friends on Facebook. And, this is a grayed out terminal length beard, ponytail, tattooed up, chain smoking, real skinny, with a Harley Davidson, but his house is dilapidated. Dude that would look after my pit bull when I went to university for 12 hours or when I would take trips or whatever. So I would take girls over there and we'd all sit there and smoke. And I was like, it was so cool to me because the guy was more lonely than me. He didn't have a friend in the world, but he had a couple, man, he was a wreck.
Was he, what was his relation in terms of the weed? Why did you go there?
He had some real dirt weed. I smoked with him once, and that dirt weed had seeds. And so that's where I didn't know where to get seeds. So I started growing weed with those seeds and cultivating better and better genetics generation after generation. And I ended up within like 6 or 8 months, fully supplying myself with weed for the next 3 years or so.
Wow.
I only smoked my own supply that I grew. So now I became even more reclusive because I was so afraid of losing my PhD. I didn't want to bring people over.
Yeah.
And
oh man, I could feel that. Yeah.
Right. So I shifted all of that paranoia because I got off of the harder drugs and was just smoking my own weed, making my own hash and whatever. And I had the grow rooms and I had the guitars. And so it was basically the life of getting real high playing guitar, and getting real high doing yoga, and getting real high and going to university. And eventually even like teaching classes and whatever going on, all the responsibilities of being a PhD. So I was kind of co-developing all that stuff, and my guitar got sick. I was sick of guitar, just like my yoga. If anybody was at yoga today, I mean, oh, you were there?
I was there, yeah.
Oh,
I guess we didn't talk much.
No, I forgot you were there.
I was there, yeah.
Did you see a little hand balance at the end?
Yeah, you were like on one hand, and that shit was crazy.
That's how good my guitar was.
Man, you have a guitar here?
I do, but I'm so out of practice right now. It's embarrassing. Anyway. So I was co-developing all these things, my PhD, my guitar. I was very occupied with that, but unsatisfied. I was trying to scratch an itch in the wrong place because the itch was social. The itch was with women and relations, even with my parents, but I was scratching the itch in all these other places and really digging in. I was digging in with the guitar and with the PhD. I mean, I published papers in peer-reviewed journals. And and then the yoga, I mean, I was doing a lot of handstands and that kind of stretching, whatever. I had no ambition or idea that I'd be teaching yoga. I was only practicing for my own sanity and contentment in my body.
That's what I wanted to ask you next. Now so at what point did you realize I want to teach you were going for the PhD?
I never really wanted to teach yoga. I still don't.
But you did?
I did that. I mean, it was just the best decision for a career.
Well, at what point in your PhD did you decide that?
I had a psychological experience when I had returned from Italy. I had a few. Some of them were very, very blissful, but one was very upsetting, and it had to do with recalling something that had happened to my sister before I was born. Oh. And I confirmed it with her, and she didn't understand how I knew it because it was not something that was like talked about, and I wasn't alive. So that I was starting to have like an existential kind of situation where I saw how numbing the PhD work was to my experience, my yoga experience. And in a lot of ways, my yoga practice was kind of counterbalancing my PhD stuff. And that's why I thought the only career is to teach yoga, because that will be the least destabilizing to my yoga experience. I prioritized my yoga experience, just like I prioritized my music or my drug experience, just like I prioritized even the girlfriend experience. It was the sex. We fucked 1,000 times in that year. I swear. One time I fucked her 8 times in a day, and I came 7 times. No pills, nothing.
Must have been water at the end.
I don't know.
Or nothing.
I don't know what it was. It was ejaculate. I had white ejaculate, except the 8th time I couldn't come. But I was so immersed in the sensation, and just like in the wrestling, it was so immersed in the sensation. So it was like all my focus went from that to the music and drugs to the yoga bliss experience. My Instagram handle is PhD Yogi Chris. For the longest time, it was Yoga Bliss Chris.
Yeah.
And I changed that. I got blocked for like 3 months or something during COVID, where it was like my stories were only getting a few views. And so I created backup accounts and started using them. And roundabout way, somehow Yoga Bliss Chris, somehow I ended up changing the handle to PhD Yogi Chris, whatever.
Okay. So You're in your PhD.
And I thought I would start teaching yoga for the social experience. I was using it as a game gambit.
Oh, I see. So you were kind of using it as like, hey, I'm a yoga teacher because hot women
Sort
love
of.
yoga.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it like that. And not even hot women, any women, but women I would definitely fuck. And but I mean, I was already using it before I got into teaching by just talking with women about yoga and trying to get them to come over and practice or like, you know, go to a class together or something. So it was already seeping its way into my strategy to interact with women.
That was your mating strategy.
Yeah, I mean, similar to how weed was my mating strategy. That's how I met that girlfriend.
Yeah,
music. I mean, I would try to play music with girls.
Yeah.
I never tried to wrestle with girls. Wrestling was very nothing I could use there for getting with a girl.
Well, you know, gave you a good body, and it's like, hey, I'm a wrestler.
Right, and I ended up using that. I would be like, I got the girls that I got with was they liked my body. I had no communication skills, no way to bridge the gap. So a lot of alcohol was used, and you know, just my appreciation of my body.
Yeah, yeah. So this is, I think, the part that excites me the most.
Good, we got there finally.
It's all good, but like at what like. That's a big move to go from the PhD world to say, I'm not going to use my PhD and I'm just going to travel around and teach yoga. Like, tell them what you told me earlier, because that was the cool part about how you emailed, like, just talk about how you emailed.
I've said that a bunch to these guys. I don't know that it's interesting to them. I called 2,000 yoga studios.
That's insane.
You know, and it just started with wherever I lived in Gainesville, and I had a communication line with the 5 yoga studios there. So then.
And how much were they paying you per workshop?
Oh, it depends. I mean, it depends on attendance, and it's a commission split and how much you're charging per the workshop.
Like, what was your average?
Well, it changed. It really fluctuated. Like the most I ever made was probably like 1,600 for a weekend, and I probably had like 4 or 5 events in that 4 or 5 workshops. But I mean, there were many that flopped. Like nobody showed up, or just a few people showed up, and sometimes the studio owner would like take pity on me and just give me all of the money or something.
How did you handle that though? If nobody showed up, I mean, in terms of,
I would record a video blog.
And like, what would you say?
I had the yoga studio space, so I would just record some video content.
Yeah, I think this is inspiring.
Yeah, I was very inspired to teach. I mean, you couldn't stop me. I sucked at wrestling when I started. I sucked at guitar when I started.
Oh shit!
I was really bad. I didn't like have an aptitude when I picked it up. I just gritted my teeth and learned some songs. And then when I got really high once, I was playing one of the songs that I was learning, and everybody was watching me. And I didn't understand. I felt it, but I just kept playing. I had an ear that unlocked at some point. But so I was really bad to start with.
You were persistent, because I think this is.
I was bad at yoga too. I was so stiff.
Wow.
The only thing, what I could do was a headstand, and I could push from my hands up to my hand, push from seated up to a handstand, not holding the handstand, with terrible form, hurting my wrists. You know, it was garbage, but I was strong enough to do it. So that's what kept me doing yoga, because it gave me something to do.
Yeah. And I mean, this story of quitting your you did the PhD. I shouldn't say quitting. I'm saying your story of going from the professional world PhD to like being a traveling yogi,
right,
doing your own thing.
Right.
That takes balls. I think a lot of people want to do that, man. I think a lot of people want to quit their day job and go do that. So like, how did you get through the low moments?
Low moments?
Yeah, there had to.
There's going to be a few things here.
Where you were broke, where nobody wanted to learn from you.
I don't know that there's low moments. There was like low. It was like low the whole time. But
how'd you get through it?
Well, I mean, it's the same reason why I'm here now, because I just wanted to learn Arash's stuff.
But did you ever think like, I can't do this? Like, I'm just going to go back and run back to my PhD and because that's a thought did that ever enter your mind?
Yeah,
like I'm gonna go backwards.
All kinds of plan Bs and plan. It's never backwards. It's just rerouting. Mm-hmm. And like before I finished my PhD, I had already met Arash and I'd already been studying.
Oh, okay.
So I went to Italy, and that's when I came back and I started looking into some things, and I found some like psychology books, and the pickup arts and whatever. And that's when I started making leaps in my awareness of psychology and things like that, which I had no education in psychology at all, except maybe some visualization for wrestling.
Yeah.
And that's it really. And then after a year or so, I came across Arash and started really studying. That was, 28 and a half or so. I was about the age of Alex Palacio is. And that's when I first came across Arash content. And then, so it was about another year and a half or year and 2/3 after I came across Arash's content. It was about another 20 months or so before I graduated. So that was the last 20 months of my PhD studies and dissertation defense and all that shit was I was studying AZD content. I'd already flown to California and met him several times because I'd gone to Vegas camp. I'd gone with him and Vince Kelvin. He was doing all these collaborations with Vince Kelvin. So
you already met him.
And I was doing coaching calls with Vince. So I had like 30 or 40 phone calls with Vince, like coaching sessions. And, they were collaborating on all these things. Like Arash had the Diamond Mine program. So I was on that. It was a once-a-week lecture with like some short videos throughout the week. And so I was already tapping into that social experience, and I was having to make give and take with my life. So I was focusing less on the guitar, although, which I had to unplug from my attachments to things. And I had to sell the weed equipment at some point and stop doing that. Like I had a good enough Weed Connect. I had some Bitcoins and I had access to the Silk Road, which was a black market website. And so I could buy what I needed. And I did. And I even experimented with more drugs through that, but then I really stopped. And then, so the guitar really distilled itself down, almost like my yoga has, where instead of being good at all the yoga out there, I'm really good at some things in yoga, which are muscle activations, pranayama, breathing, holding your breath especially, and, some applied anatomy, especially as it relates to hand balancing. But in most things, like hip opening, all the important things, spine bending, like just applied anatomy. Like, so I got some focused things on there, but I don't know sequences, a lot of sequences out there. There's a lot of new innovative postures I don't know. I'm not hip and familiar with like all that stuff. I specialized. So the guitar, I kind of let go of a lot of songs and got focused on about 10 to 12 high level songs that are world-class songs. And I could play those songs. And then with AZD, so I'm learning, okay, I can't just go to camps. I got to have some social life. And I'm on university and there's all these girls. It's a 50,000 person undergraduate campus. And I got to get some girls. What the fuck is going on here? I did Neil Strauss's Style Life Academy for like almost a year and I only fucked one girl one time. And that was the whole year for me. So then I started doing like salsa, swing dance,
try and get the girls.
Started going to more yoga classes, got into acro yoga, started trying to teach acro yoga, did some acro yoga trainings for myself. So I better teach it. That's when I started doing free yoga at the park. And I was using my pickup skills to just open girls on campus when I would walk across campus and talk to them and just go right into, I teach yoga, come to yoga, here, are you friends on Facebook? And then join this. And then, and I just kept doing that and kept using my pickup to funnel my yoga classes that were donation or whatever. And I would use that to leverage to get into studios and teach at this studio, that studio. Not every studio is the same. They teach different styles. Some are more established, less established, high level person running it, new college kid running it. So it's a whole different spectrum thing. Some studios, you fuck somebody there, so you can't teach there anymore. And then you fuck everything up. And then small town, and I fucked everything up. And they were fucking stupid also, the fucking feminist bitches. And they're probably miserable and single right now. They're stupid. I was way too big for Gainesville.
Yeah.
So
you became a traveling yogi.
Now, well, yeah, one of the teachers that I had found on YouTube, because I was still so self-practiced and I was teaching without a teacher certificate. Like I hadn't been trained or authorized by someone. So the person I resonated with the most was a traveling yogi, whose name is Doug Swenson. And he's been teaching yoga for like 50 years. And he's about 70 years old. He's been vegan for 40 something years. And so before I finished my PhD, I flew to, it's about 6 or 8 months before the end of my PhD. I flew to Lake Tahoe for 3.5 weeks and did an intensive training with them, and then got a certificate. And
Were you happy during the time you were traveling and all these cities? You said you went to 60 cities and did all these workshops. Were you happy?
My happiness has been on a steady incline.
That's better than a decline.
It's been on a steady incline since I woke up to my own mind.
When was that?
Around 27. So everything before 27, I really don't take much responsibility for, because I was just so ignorant. I didn't even know I had a mind. I was unaware that my mind was separate from me, and I was an entity or an awareness separate from my mind. And so I was attached to my mind as if I was my mind, living life as my mind. And so I don't even know what my happiness was like. I was just a push button, give me pleasure, I'll feel good, give me pain, I'll feel bad kind of thing. With some sense of delayed gratification because of Boy Scouts and wrestling and my dad. And
I was a Boy Scout too. I was an Eagle Scout.
I never made Eagle. I got too into wrestling, and I was just like, fuck that. I was a Life Scout at 12.
Okay.
And we were a very accomplished troop 735 in Maryland. So we won all the camp competitions, and I was the cadence caller. So we would actually march to the mess hall and everything, and to the meetings. And I would be like, left, 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 right. And I had these chants that I would say. We were tight. We were super sharp and everything. But I kept camping with them up until about 14. But then I got real into wrestling, and I was a year-round athlete because I was a state champ cross country runner. And so I ran a lot, and I was playing a lot of soccer, and
cool.
So I just kind of faded out of Boy Scouts, and the only thing I had left was my conservation project, and I just never did it.
Yeah.
And I kind of regret it, kind of don't, whatever. I don't regret the past, because I'm captain of IMC Nation. And so that's when I say, like, so was I happy? I was happy as could be, because it's been all on this path that got me here. So I was, at the time there were struggles. I was living life the way I wanted to, given that just because you want to jump off that building and fly on your way down doesn't mean you can. You can try, and you're welcome to live your life the way you want to. So if you want to jump off the building and try to fly, you're welcome to. So I jumped into my life. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to succeed, but I was happy because I was going for it.
Yeah.
And, there were, obstacles, and things didn't feel good. And definitely the money issue was a thing. There weren't camps like there are now. So it wasn't like there was such a money demand to keep paying for training. But living and those expenses and relying on people's handouts, and my pride. And then, traveling it was more difficult with sex. I wasn't such a pickup artist. Like I would just plus I was in a town for business. So you fuck your rep up a little bit. You're there for business. You pick up a yoga chick, and that's the yoga chick at the studio. If you go super sexual with her. And so I was really torn, because I'd learned Vince Kelvin's direct game, but I was learning the philosophy and game of AZD. And I was fading out of Vince Kelvin stuff because I saw it wasn't succeeding at a high level, and Arash was definitely succeeding.
That's interesting.
All my pickup skills were the direct and Vince Kelvin approach, and with some awareness of mystery method and Neil Strauss's. So I was really unintegrated with my game, but I had some success. I had a girlfriend before I finished my PhD. I got a girlfriend, and when I was traveling, she didn't want to not be my girlfriend, so she was exclusive to me and real loyal. And I was getting with other girls and telling her about it and holding it down at a distance. But we just messaged the other day. She's the one that loaned me 23 grand to train with Arash. She had a son. She was a mom. She was a yoga student. She came as a yoga student and saw me, just kill it because I was so good.
What happened to her? Why did it end? I guess.
Because she couldn't hang, and it was hard. It was difficult to be with me. I was very demanding. I was less developed and mature than I am now. Probably had a lot more. I definitely had a lot more behavior, bad habits, and character flaws, and all the way from grooming to certainty and masculinity, and I was away a lot, and I was less calibrated, and I didn't have the value, the survival value that I had now. I was studying Arash, and I had a lot of my survival value was my mindset and communication. And it's one thing to have all of the data that Arash gives you. It's another thing to be able to communicate it.
Yeah.
And it's another thing to be able to communicate it in an attractive way that keeps her coming back. Basically applying, because you really don't. And then it's another thing to live the philosophy without having to talk much about it. Because I ended up getting her by impressing her with the ideas that I was learning from Arash. And it made sense, and I could make sense of it. I was a smart guy, and I just kept the flow talking. I had an online yoga program, so she would be watching my lectures. I was streaming, she'd watch my streams. And that's how you keep her mind occupied with you. And, you know, while you feed her your philosophy, so that she's, like I said, these girls have similar values, not on a comprehensive way, just on a deep enough way that we can move. Like, they all know I'm with other women. I just talked with one woman about I'm with 4 other women. I just talked with another woman about I'm with 4 other women. My main 2 women already know I'm with 4 other women. I talked to them about the other women, less about each other, but more about the new women. But, you know, not too much, just enough. I mean, there's this balance that's happening. So with the yoga, and got her, and then, yeah, the traveling, and was I happy? It was cool, man. There was a lot of cool things.
It sounds like a dream. You get to see all these different cities. You get
Yeah,
to meet
that's
all
the
these
thing.
different people.
And I would tell people this. A lot of people have the dream to travel.
Yeah.
Travel is lonely.
Uh,
You don't know how important that is until you travel for 3 years. And you learn to quickly make friends, but how shallow the friendship is. I mean, you move on. What happens to now? My second girl is a girl that I met on my travel. She came to a workshop.
Yeah.
And then she joined my online program for a couple of years. She had a man. She has a kid. And she just kept studying me, and then they separated, and then she became mine. My other girl told me about it, and I hit her up, and then she came around. And now she's improved herself so much, and she keeps improving. Now she's moving here and bringing her mom here and her kid here, but I don't have anything to do with the kid.
Yeah. So, at what point did the business end? When did you stop the traveling, and why? COVID?
Yeah, COVID shut down all the studios. I was starting to fade out. I wasn't making as many cold calls, and I had some last gigs that were kind of in a, you know, with the way the cold calling was, you would ideally you would keep it going so that the tour just continues, and you just kind of you needed like a 2-month minimum, but usually more like 3, 4, or 5-month head start on the event to create all the content and promote it and set up the events, and so people know about it. And then when you travel there, people are attending. So I had to be 3 or 4 months ahead in my booking. So if I wait until I'm out of bookings and then start calling again, I have to wait a couple months before I have more gigs to make money. And I did that mistake a lot, where I didn't keep up with my prospecting. So I learned to prospect while I was on the road, so that I could keep adding events to the end of my tour while I was on the road, because I was my own booking manager. I was my own marketing. I was my own producer. I created all my flyers and everything, my YouTube videos. I didn't have staff. I eventually got staff, and the staff helped me do the research, because 2,000 yoga studios, you can't just look them up and call them. There's going to be a lot of wasted time. I had to keep data. So I had big spreadsheets, and it eventually got to the place where it was organized by state, because I was about 2/3 the way through the United States yoga industry. I had still some of the metropolitan areas of, you know, the New England area, and some of the bigger cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. I hadn't prospected those. So I had about 1/3 of the remaining yoga studios in the nation that I was still going to call. And then also I wasn't going to Alaska and Hawaii. And I was already starting to look international. I had a spreadsheet for Sweden, I think, or Switzerland. But it was the apprentices that would research the yoga studios. They would come to my online program, Silent Flute. Silent Flute is my online program. It's a name given to me by Arash. It's the Bruce Lee poem called The Silent Flute. And he told me that story when I first did my one-on-one with him or something. And I got this palm tattoo, which matches Arash's infinity palm tattoo. And I did that in New York City at a Vince Kelvin boot camp. And I posted about it. And then AZD called me and said, I want you to teach a program called The Silent Flute. And it took me a year before I started it. Because I didn't have any confidence doing that. But that is the exchange that the staff members, that's how there's Johnny Ranger. Johnny Ranger looked up like 400 yoga studios or something. So I had these spreadsheets. So now I have these spreadsheets by state, and you just go to the state and man. And so that's how I would make my rounds, like calling, because I had to call an adjacent state. I couldn't be in Florida and drive to California. A lot of gas expense. So I was limited in the range of what would the next city be, because driving was cheaper versus flying there and flying back, or driving there and driving back. I had to tack them on into a tour to economically make it feasible. And so did all of that. And then, towards the end, I wasn't calling as many studios because I was making money with Arash. I had, in my it was 2019. That's when the caveat program was $25,000. And I didn't have any money. I was only making $32,000 a year. So a lot of expenses. So
32,000 a year from all the traveling.
Yeah, that was my net revenue for yoga that year.
Does that include the hotels? Like you still have to pay?
Those are
hotels?
expenses. Yeah, I had to pay for my Airbnbs. My revenue was 32K.
That's what you take home.
That's my gross.
Okay.
So my net was like less.
Oh.
My net was whatever I had in savings, which was I had 1,000 in credit, and I mean I lived on credit too, like a lot of. So I maxed out all that stuff, and I was going for it. But I was also becoming famous. Like people were recognizing me in cities that I'd been to.
That's really
because I ran social media ads for myself to fill my events. So over the course of years, I had paid like $4,000 or so in social media ads for my own events when I would go places. So I learned all of that. I became my internet marketer for myself. I did everything. I did the whole business. Like you don't understand how much work it takes to do.
Yeah.
You do because you're a doctor, but it's such a different field that you're going to be astonished at how much it is. Because you have no training in it. I had no training in it, but I had some experience. Like I had door knocked when I was a high schooler to pay myself to the national wrestling tournament because my dad didn't have the money. So that's like cold calling. I had a apprentice or whatever at an insurance company, which had me cold calling a little bit. So I had some of that, all the wrestling training helped me with the nerves of like doing that. And I had Arash communication skills, and Brian Casella helped me out a lot with sales skills. I lived with him for like a total of like 9 months or so in those 3 years, and would make the calls. That's when I would run out of business, and so I would just go live with Brian and then hit the phones heavy for a couple months, fill up my calendar, and then leave. And so I'm indebted to him.
Wow.
So
yeah, I mean,
and that was a connection I made through IMC Nation. So my first camp with Arash, the GSLR, Brian was there. And the story goes like we were all there to do pickup, and Brian was talking, and it was like 8 guys that were just hanging around him talking at the W Hotel in the lounge, and nobody was talking to anybody, any women or anything. And I was I didn't know anything. I didn't even know who Brian was. I just knew he's one of the junior speakers. And so I asked him about an opener. He was like, here's an opener. And I went and opened somebody. And it didn't go anywhere, but he noted down that here's this guy that is down to learn pickup, and he does what I tell him to. And later I was considering becoming a real estate agent under him because I knew he knew how to succeed, and I would just do what he says. We are very similar. He went through a military academy, high school academy, and he was an athlete. And so my military and athletics, he was also a Boy Scout. And so all of that, we related a lot, like in our behavior. And obviously IMC, he was a big AZD student. So it was very easy to get along with Brian. And so traveling, the money, happiness, I was going for it, and I was putting the pieces together as best they made sense. My salvation was definitely in the ongoing lectures, tuning into AZD lectures, so mind freeing, and applying it to my relationship and trying to make my life better with women, get more women, still hungry, thirsty, starving for women, like, even though I had that one girl. And then COVID, and I was starting to, like, I would have hit the calls again because I mean, it was getting to the point I had made myself into, I had the call list, I had the ability to keep it going. I could keep going with my yoga gigs, and it would have gone as big as I wanted it to. It would have gone international. I would have organized all of my, because I have like yoga products and ebooks and stuff. I would have organized them into yoga teacher trainings, 200-hour trainings. I was certified through Yoga Alliance. So I would have been creating yoga teachers, would have had an online yoga teacher. That's where I was at when I stopped, was I was looking at the syllabus for online teacher training and looking at renting retreat centers to bring people to do the yoga training. And so about let's see, it was in April or March of 20 or February or so, somewhere in there, 2019. That's when Arash came out with this $25,000 program. And so I applied to all these loans and tried to sell my car and everything. And I couldn't come up with any money. Nobody would give me any money. And all I had was $2,000, some credit and some cash. And so I talked to my girlfriend into loaning me the 23 grand just for this weekend training. And I did it and I made it. And afterwards, that's when Arash said, I want you to get people to do these camps and I'll give you 10%. And you don't have to pay anymore. You just come. And later I did end up paying, when we went through the sponsorship phases with the Millionaires Club, like I was paying Arash. I paid him $5 grand and then another $5 grand the next month and then $3 grand a month for like 8 months in a row. And I was paying for private moments. Like the first year that I lived with Arash, I paid him like $25,000 in training, just continuing training, living with him. Only now I don't pay for camps.
Wow.
So, and Fernando was the first guy that I got to come to a $25,000 training. That was the only product I had to sell. I didn't have any $1,500 boot camps or $600 online camps. That didn't exist. There was nothing except a $25,000 program to sell. And so I went from no prospecting list to going and prospecting people to sell them $25,000 program.
This is like one big journey.
It is a huge journey.
I mean, it's like
It's what I'm trying to get Sultan to do. I said it's what I'm trying to get Sultan to do.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've got your story. I mean,
Close. I'm almost into the common era. I feel like there's like BC before Christ, and then there's like AD. I feel like I'm almost up to AD right now.
what is the Christ? What is the is it the birth of Christ? Is that when it's 0, or is it the death of Christ?
It's neither. It's off by a few years. It
Oh,
has
yeah?
something to do with whatever the Roman calendar.
So what was
but
it?
it's essentially around the birth
Is
of
it
Christ.
before COVID, like BC? Like what was your
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. BC, man, that's a good one.
So you quit the yoga business around COVID.
Sort of. I mean, I still get people buying online products, but it's rare. I have a website, ninthlimb.com. Still runs.
And then
The yoga YouTube right now is 6,000 subscribers.
wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, you never seen my yoga YouTube?
No.
Guerrero was before he went to Bikram, was using some of my yoga videos on there. So if I go to my yoga YouTube right there, there's my videos. I had over 700 videos posted. And a lot of them, they're not like shorts. Like I didn't make shorts like that. And is there a way to sort this? Oh, I can't sort it. Anyway, I have one video that I believe is over 150,000 views. It's an hour-long yoga class. And so that's what Guerrero was doing for like a couple months. So yeah, but I pretty much stepped out of it. And so before I stepped out of it, about 8 or 9 months before, is when I started making commission with Arash. So I had an online yoga business separate from the travel yoga business because I had digital products and my membership program. That was a different beast. Just because you could close deals for yoga gigs doesn't mean you could close deals for getting people on your, and I considered that I could stop traveling and teaching and just focus on online teaching. And I was making about 1,500 a month or 1,000 a month or something. It was about a third split on average. I was making a third of my income with Arash, a third of my income with my travel business, and a third of my income with my online yoga. And so COVID shut down the travel business. The online yoga, I just stopped focusing on it. That went with the yoga bit because I could more than make up for that if I put all my attention on Arash's business, which was sometime around the month before COVID. The camps changed from $25,000 camps to $1,500 boot camps. And so I got all of a sudden it was an explosion of people I could get to come to the event. And I got another girlfriend. I broke up with that girlfriend, ironically, after she loaned me all the money. And like 8 months later. And so that girlfriend actually flew with me to San Jose twice for the first 2 months of COVID. And then we broke up. She was in the circus. She kept doing that. And I was pouring all of my attention that remember, I prospected 2,000 yoga studios continuously. It's not one-time call. I was calling them multiple times throughout the year. And my online yoga business, which was staying in touch, direct message with people to get them to buy products or join my yoga group. And I put all of that attention into organizing IMC Nation, because all it was AZD had an Instagram and some people signed up for Love Spell, or at the time, yeah, it was Love Spell, which was 4 or 5 days a week, $97 a month. And they were, and then there was these Tabiat training programs that were $25,000, but I was getting one person every other month to do that. So, and then they would make payments, so I'd make a commission, but it was kind of sporadic. But when the boot camps came out with $1,500, my income kind of smoothed out. It wasn't, but then COVID hit, so it dropped, but it was still enough because it was still enough. I was still hungry, meaning literally hungry, making like $2,700 a month, but I still got to fly to San Jose and rent some Airbnb for a month and pay for my food. So I was pretty much zero and make credit card payments or whatever. So it made sense after I broke up with that second girl, and I was just kept flying back and forth to San Jose. And I was like, well, it's only going uphill from here. I mean, there was the COVID crash to the business, but it's still climbing. It was before the beast process. So it's just Love Spell boot camps. And I was finding more and more IMC Nation people just scattered over Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And I messaged everybody. Ebo blocked me on the YouTube. I can't even comment anymore because I was messaging everybody. And Ebo runs his Rastapar website. So I decided I was going to move to San Jose, which I'd always thought about, but I refused to do because everybody that had done that was no longer working with Arash. So I didn't want to do that. But it made sense that was the thing to do. So I moved to San Jose. We didn't have a base, so I just lived out of an Airbnb. I moved like 3 or 4 times to different Airbnbs for 3 months while we looked for a house. And I just lived as a solo guy in a single bedroom Airbnb here. Sultan didn't live here. Fernando didn't live here. Demigod didn't live here. AZD lived here. So we weren't together at all. And that started eventually we found the house and we started that whole era. That's AD, after COVID.
Wow. Is there anything else that we should talk about?
And that's where the camp started. So the boot camps, when it shifted from $25,000 to $1,500 camp, that's number 1. And then we're at camp number 40 right now.
Wow.
So that was 40 camps ago, 40 months ago when it shifted. And that was the January of 2020 when it shifted. So.
Interesting timing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we should discuss? Or I feel like what are we at? Like an hour and 10 minutes?
I don't know, whatever is worth it for you, because the audience is, it's a thin audience. I guess they're entertained because they're still here.
Yeah, we got our 6 people, five
if you don't include us.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Adrian, he bounced. Comments.
So was that useful for you? Was that everything?
Yeah, that was cool, man. That was a cool story. I mean, I think you're underselling yourself in terms of.
Dang, I should sell myself more.
I mean, no, in terms of I guess I don't know. I guess the traveling can be lonely, but to me, it just
very
seems,
lonely.
Yeah.
I obviously had some very cool experiences. I mean,
yeah. You probably have friends in a lot of cities.
Well,
like you could.
The only friends I have are in IMC Nation.
But other people, that's true. But
I've burned a lot of bridges prospecting for IMC Nation.
Oh shit!
If a guy doesn't join Dragon Slayer, I don't want to have anything to do with
fucking die.
If a bitch doesn't want to fly here and see me, I don't want to have anything to do with her. I don't have friends outside of girls that are with me or gonna be with me, and guys that are gonna join IMC Nation.
Yeah,
that's what you'll go through. Because I went through that while I was still a PhD. I was posting ideas about anti-feminism, and I lost a lot of yoga students. And I kept prospecting. I kept going. You're gonna have to burn through all of the suppressive people in your life, and almost nobody's gonna make it. There's
Fuck.
nobody in my life right now from wrestling. There's nobody in my life right now from my PhD. There's nobody in my life right now from my travel yoga except my two girls. I also met my main girl at a yoga event, but I met her through Brian Casella. She was a real estate agent at the time. So she was on a program. So I met her basically through IMC. And that's it really. I almost want to say Johnny Ranger, but Johnny Ranger was IMC before. I mean, he just ended up getting into yoga and came to some yoga events. But so there's nobody that I know from the yoga world currently. There are a couple, like there's one girl, I just unfollowed her this morning actually. There's this really voluptuous black girl from Jacksonville. Which means like huge tits, huge ass, tiny little waist, mom, she's a MILF. And we banged once. But so like that. I know her from the yoga world, but I just unfollowed her. So yeah.
All right. We got 2 people left, so I think it's good time to call it.